Once for Moscow, war was a story of distant frontiers where the sound of gunfire and fire never seemed to reach the capital. From the Kremlin's cold perspective, explosions existed only on the front lines, and the sound of sirens was familiar only to residents of border cities like Belgorod. Moscow remained encased in a giant armor of illusion, where war was only present on television screens, in news reports so filtered, polished, and censored that the smell of gunpowder was gone. But all illusions collapsed on October 21st and 22nd, 2025, when Russia suffered the most intense missile attack since the war began. In that moment, millions of Russians realized that the war was no longer a special operation shown on TV, but a real nightmare that was coming into their own homes. The sirens now rang not only in border regions like Belgorod, but also over Moscow and its seemingly impregnable suburbs. The sound was no longer the distant hum of a drone. It was the terrifying screech of new generation Storm Shadow and Peklo missiles, tearing through the night air, bringing unprecedented fear to a nation that had once thought itself invulnerable. At the same time, the huge chemical plant in Bryansk and the strategic engineering facility in Saransk, which supplied ammunition, gunpowder, and rocket fuel to the Russian army, were blown up. At the same time, transformer stations in the Smolensk and Bryansk regions, which supplied power to the Russian army, were also attacked. An oil refinery in Makhachkala, 1,200 kilometers away, which supplied fuel to the Caspian Sea naval base, was also attacked in the same wave. These cities have been kept afloat by the vast industrial complexes left over from the Soviet era. They are the only source of livelihood for tens of thousands of Russians. Now, the people who fueled Putin's war machine have been left jobless and without a future overnight. This is not just a few burnt warehouses or a billion-dollar facility reduced to rubble. This is a deeper, irreversible collapse. It is the breakdown of Vladimir Putin's implicit social contract with the Russian people. In the smoky skies of Bryansk and the silent factories of Saransk, the pact was simple. You don't question the war, and the state will guarantee you wages, security, and normalcy in your daily life. On October 21st, this pact was burned to ashes by the missiles of Storm Shadow, Peklo, Neptune, and Flamingo. To understand the true scale of this devastation, we must look at a Soviet-era term, Monogorod, meaning single city. Industrial centers like Bryansk and Saransk did not possess the diverse economic structure of a Western city. No, the entire existence of hundreds of thousands of people in these cities was tied to a single giant factory, just like in Soviet times. The Bryansk chemical plant or the Saransk mechanical plant was not just a workplace for those areas, but the heart, lungs, and blood circulation of the city. Schools, hospitals, heating systems, and the entire social life were directly dependent on the smoke coming from the chimneys of these establishments. The cold numbers of the economic disaster that followed the October 21st coup are slowly chipping away at Moscow's propaganda wall. Independent economists and local employment reports show that the closure of the two facilities has affected more than just factory workers. According to early estimates, the livelihoods of between 70,000 and 85,000 people, including small service workshops, logistics and maintenance companies, and the local merchants through whom labor money once flowed, have all but evaporated in an instant. This is not simply an economic downturn, but a complete paralysis of the region. These are tens of thousands of people who, overnight, have lost their jobs, are hungry, and have no future. These are not liberal activists protesting in Moscow. On the contrary, these crowds are Putin's core voters, the ones he thought he could not sway. They are ordinary Russians who quietly continue to work for the motherland, remaining loyal to the regime as long as they are paid and do not question the propaganda. Now that pact has been torn apart. Leaked data from Telegram channels, OSENT groups, and the local V-Contacti community revealed the true scale of the public reaction, a storm of panic, anger, and betrayal. Images and messages flooded the internet, capturing the chaos and suffocating helplessness. All of this contrasted sharply with Governor Bogomaz's denial that no damage was done. "Our factory is gone," wrote one desperate worker, followed shortly by another, more anguished cry. "We have no money. Who will feed us? How will we survive this winter?" This is not a political uprising. It is far more dangerous and frightening. It is a voice of hunger, cold, and despair. It is the bitter cry of people who realize that the regime they once trusted has failed to deliver on its most basic promise: stability. And it is this wave of anger that is forcing Vladimir Putin into a corner from which there is no other way out. To understand the true cost of the October 21st attacks on the Kremlin, we must look beyond burning powder kegs or collapsing roofs. The real cost is not measured in billions of rubles, but in the shattered social stability and lost futures of tens of thousands of loyal Russian citizens who were plunged into poverty overnight. That is the structure of the crisis. Until now, Putin has been waging his war in a parallel universe, a place where reality is distorted at will. While soldiers fall on the front lines, behind them, workers continue to work and receive regular salaries as if there were no war. But Ukraine has broken that boundary, merging the two worlds into one, turning factories into real battlefields. It is important to understand the core. Ukraine is not attacking civilians, but acting in accordance with international law. According to the confirmation of the Ukrainian General Staff, HUR and Western intelligence sources, the two targets were the Bryansk chemical plant, which produces gunpowder, and the Saransk mechanical plant, which manufactures missile components. These are legal military targets under the laws of war. However, the Kremlin, in a ruthless strategy, has placed its own people as human shields around these military targets. This is where the trap the Kremlin has set for its own people comes into play. Putin's war machine has deliberately placed these military targets right in the middle of residential areas, at the center of their economic livelihoods. So when Ukraine attacks to deprive them of fuel for the Grad missiles, Putin also loses the livelihoods of his own people, who are used as shields. This is a brutal betrayal by the regime to its own citizens. The Kremlin has held tens of thousands of lives hostage to fuel its own war machine. The Kremlin is completely trapped in the fabric of this crisis. For Putin, there are no more win-win moves. There are only options that benefit neither side. Now, amid great chaos and helplessness, the regime is left alone with these tens of thousands of angry, unemployed, and highly skilled people. To fully understand the chaos, we must take a closer look at what actually happened that fateful night. According to HUR sources, this was the first time Moscow and its suburbs had been subjected to such a fierce attack. The targets were not only symbolic, but also carried clear strategic weight. The operation involved a combination of forces, from drones, fighter jets, to advanced missile systems. The arsenal used included precision-guided missiles such as Storm Shadow, Scalp, Neptune, Flamingo, and Peklo, along with advanced systems developed by Ukraine to penetrate Russian air defenses. Notably, guided munitions carrying the long-range Bars missile and the Palanicia drone were tested in combat for the first time, and both hit their targets with impressive accuracy. That same night, a large chemical plant in Bryansk Oblast was hit by a Franco-British Storm Shadow cruise missile. The Ukrainian General Staff confirmed the attack and said the plant produced gunpowder, rocket fuel, and explosive components for the Russian defense industry. The facility played a key role in enabling the Russian military to continue its rocket and artillery attacks on Ukraine. The attacks in Bryansk did not stop there. The drones also targeted energy infrastructure in the Smolensk and Bryansk regions. Footage shared on local Telegram channels reported widespread power outages due to damaged transformer stations and partially disabled thermal power plants, CHP. These attacks directly damaged not only military, but also civilian infrastructure. Another major target that night was the Saransk mechanical plant in Saransk, 670 kilometers from the Ukrainian border. According to an official statement from Ukraine's Defense Intelligence Agency, the facility produces weapons, ammunition, and components for various defense systems. An oil refinery supplying fuel to the Caspian Sea naval base in Makhachkala, 1,200 kilometers away, was also hit in the same attack. Why is targeting the Bryansk and Saransk plants so important? The Bryansk chemical plant is a major source of gunpowder, explosives, and solid rocket propellants for the Russian military. Fuel for multiple rocket launchers like the Grad and Smerch, as well as propellants for artillery shells, are produced there. Destroying the plant with precision-guided missiles like the Storm Shadow would not only shut down production lines, but would also cut off a key lifeline supplying Russia's frontline artillery and rocket systems. Meanwhile, the Saransk mechanical plant produces key military components for missiles, drones, or other precision weapons systems and possibly specialized ammunition components. The facility was temporarily shut down in 2020 due to safety violations involving the use of explosives. Production has since ramped up again under Rostec supervision to fuel Moscow's war machine. But Ukraine has struck again. The attack on the plant shows that Russia cannot produce even in the places it considers the deepest and safest. The Dagnotech refinery is no ordinary energy facility. It is the fuel heart of the Caspian flotilla. Located on the coast of Dagestan, the refinery processes around 1 million tons of petroleum products annually, fueling not only warships but all military operations in southern Russia. The fuel produced here flows through the veins of warships patrolling the Caspian Sea, military convoys, radar and missile systems, and even logistics bases that stretch along the coast. The entire military presence in the region depends on the refinery's output, and that is why targeting Dagnotech is such a nightmare for Moscow. If even a small part of the refinery's production capacity is disrupted, Russia will immediately have to ship naval fuel hundreds of kilometers from other refineries. But this solution is neither cheap nor secure, as most of those routes are now targets for Ukrainian drone attacks, meaning that if Dagnotech goes silent, it will not only silence the pipelines, but also the warships. Thus, Putin's social contract with the Russian people was torn apart before the eyes of millions, both in the posh suburbs of Moscow and in the heart of industrial cities like Bryansk. For years, for Moscow's elite and ordinary Muscovites, the war was a special operation in remote areas of Ukraine watched on TV. The capital lay under an impregnable dome. Kremlin propaganda had fanned the myth that Moscow was protected by the world's most advanced air defense systems, an impregnable fortress. On the night of October 21st, this illusion of a fortress collapsed completely. As sirens blared and the sky lit up with anti-aircraft fire, Muscovites were confronted with the reality that their capital was under direct missile attack for the first time since World War II. Metro stations became shelters. Elites living in luxury complexes realized that Putin's propaganda of calm power was a lie and that war had come to their homes, their comfort zones. This was the moment when the regime's role as a security provider ended. Ukraine had been gathering intelligence and identifying targets for months to create this panic. Before the real blows could be delivered, it was necessary to blind, deafen, and paralyze the entire air defense network in European Russia. This was achieved by using hundreds of UAVs in swarm formations. Many of these UAVs were decoys. Some were suicide drones loaded with explosives. The swarms were spread over a vast area of hundreds of square kilometers, not just targeting a single location, but stretching from Bryansk to the outskirts of Moscow and into Dagestan. Russian air defense operators were faced with hundreds of low-cost targets suddenly appearing on their radars. They could not distinguish which targets were real threats and which were $500 decoys. They were forced to launch expensive Panzer missiles to intercept these cheap UAVs. As a result, Russia's air defense system was saturated. While the air defenses were busy with the UAVs, precision cruise missiles were coming in through those blind corridors. These stealthy British-French missiles attacked the Bryansk chemical plant. These were fire-and-forget cruise missiles. They flew low, undetectable by radar, and targeted by infrared imaging systems as they approached. This meant they were immune to GPS jamming. While the Russian Panzer systems searched the skies for UAVs, the Storm Shadow flew at treetop height, destroying the most fortified Soviet-built underground bunkers and the most important production lines at the Bryansk chemical plant. This was a blow to the heart of Russian logistics. What made the attack so devastating was not just the Western missiles. Russian military bloggers reported that new Ukrainian-made long-range cruise missiles, such as the Peklo, Flamingo, and Bars, were being aimed at Moscow. These new missiles were land attack versions of Ukraine's famous Neptune missile, which sank the cruiser Moskva. The combination of these missiles with the drones and Storm Shadow created a complex, multi-layered threat that Russian air defenses could not handle. It was a technological checkmate. Furthermore, the 670-kilometer deep strike on Saransk completely shattered Russia's strategic depth doctrine. There was no longer any safe ground. Every factory and military facility west of the Urals was a legitimate target. This three-layered attack proved that Russia's S-400 dome had been completely penetrated. Ukraine now had the ability to strike any point Russia desired, including its most valuable military-industrial facilities. This final blow, however, did not come overnight. It was the final and most deadly stage of a patient and ruthless campaign waged by Ukrainian intelligence for months to systematically strangle Russia's military-industrial complex. Ukraine first attacked frontline logistics, then fuel logistics. Now it is destroying weapons and ammunition factories. The Bryansk chemical plant and the Saransk mechanical plant were hit, dealing a major blow to Russia's reserves. While the giant chemical plant in Bryansk was reduced to ashes by Storm Shadow missiles, the regional governor, Alexander Bogomaz, made a ridiculous statement on his official Telegram channel. "We shot down 6 UAVs. There were no casualties. Everything is under control." But this time, the lie didn't work, because at the same time, videos shot by Bryansk residents themselves showed the plant turned into a giant fireball, visible for miles, lighting up the sky like hell. Worse still, the Ukrainian General Staff officially announced, "We hit it with Storm Shadow cruise missiles, not drones." Propaganda could no longer hide the truth. The state had been exposed for its incompetence and deception before its own citizens. This has left Vladimir Putin in a no-win situation that he can no longer resolve. The structure of the crisis is as follows. Until now, Putin has been waging war in a parallel universe. While soldiers were dying on the front lines, workers in the rear continued to produce with steady wages. On October 21st, Ukraine merged the two universes. It also turned factories into front lines. Putin could no longer feed the war machine and his people at the same time. The Bryansk rocket fuel production line requires high-precision special alloy reactors, complex chemical synthesis units, and control systems imported from the West through sanctions. If a Saransk machine plant produces gyroscopes or special alloy warheads for missiles, this requires multi-million-dollar CNC machines operating with an accuracy of 110,000 of a centimeter. When bunker-buster missiles like Storm Shadow hit these facilities, they not only pierce the roof, they also destroy irreplaceable equipment meters underground. Moreover, these facilities are part of state-owned companies like Rostec. This represents a loss of billions of dollars. So, could Putin rebuild these facilities? Building such a precise production line from scratch would take years, even under wartime conditions. All the high-tech machinery these facilities require is of Western, Japanese, or Korean origin. Russia does not currently have access to these, and is unlikely to get them anytime soon. Low-quality copies supplied by China could never offer the same precision or production volume. Even if Putin were to start rebuilding this plant, there is no guarantee that Ukraine would not attack it again. The result was an industrial disaster. Russia lost this vital production capacity for the rest of the war. How did Putin react to this unsolvable equation? Unable to find a reasonable solution, he resorted to desperate retaliation. However, this response was not an equal countermeasure against Ukraine's military-industrial facilities. Russia attacked Kiev's civilian energy infrastructure, hydroelectric power plants, and CHP-5s, CHP-6 thermal power plants, with more than 400 Garan-2 UAVs and Kinjal Iskander missiles. The events of October 22, 2025, mark the moment when Russia finds itself in a strategic stalemate. This is because it represents a reversal of the social contract. Unable to deliver the stability he promised his own people, Putin is attempting to create an equivalent by destroying the stability of the Ukrainian people. This is not a superpower move. It is a final, desperate cry for revenge for a lost war. The second checkmate is the irreversibility of industrial disasters. Putin's attack on a power plant in Ukraine on October 22nd could not magically bring back the Bryansk gunpowder plant. It could not restore the lost wages of workers in Saransk. But the final checkmate came from the complete collapse of the rear. The offensives of October 21st, 22, simultaneously destroyed three pillars of Russian society. The elite. Seeing that the capital is no longer impregnable, they now understand that Putin cannot protect them. This means the evaporation of underground support for the regime and the beginning of the search for a way out. Core supporters. In Bryansk and Saransk, they saw that the regime had sacrificed them. Their factories were not protected. Their jobs were lost. Putin's social contract was now invalid. This created the socio-economic basis for chaos and the risk of uprising. Propaganda control, Governor Bogomaz's no damage, lie combined with the panic of Russian war correspondents themselves that missiles were coming to Moscow, broke the state's control of the story. October 21st, 2025, was the day Russia's superpower mirage collapsed. Ukraine's technological prowess crippled Russia's vital industrial base and penetrated its air defenses. The war penetrated Moscow's posh suburbs, causing panic and triggering a final internal collapse by leaving tens of thousands of loyal Russian citizens unemployed overnight, from Bryansk to Saransk. The Kremlin could no longer defend its capital, its factories, or the loyalty of its people. This is not the beginning of the final collapse. This is the collapse. If what we shared in this video gave you a different perspective, don't forget to hit that like button. Share your thoughts with us in the comments below. Your thoughts are the most powerful part of this platform. And most importantly, don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications, because this fight is not just a frontline fight, it's a fight for truth. See you next time.